Ready to practice? Need about 6 minutes in your brain and either a piece of paper and a pen or a mind map app. Let's jump in. Let me walk you through the phases to work through the mind map. The seed term for this one is Subnet ID. So you start out making a list of every other term that comes to mind. And if you can think of an idea and you can't think of a related term, just write down as short a description as you can. I'll give you 5 seconds to stop and go off and do that. 2 minutes at most. Next up, turn that list into a mind map. So what do I mean by mind map? You put the seed term in the middle, and then you look around at your list and you say what goes together and what doesn't. So the things that go together, put them together. If there's another set of things that go together, put them together somewhere else. If there are things that don't go anywhere else with other terms, move them around and just spread them around. That's the idea. I give you 5 seconds. Go off and do that. 2 minutes at most. Last step, if you'd like to think about our term list, there's a huge list related to this video. So I've written everything I could think of that I think I mentioned during the video. It's obviously a lot. You may not have thought of all these terms, but if you'd like to take a few minutes and look at this list and add to and change or update your mind map, feel free. At most 2 minutes, I'll give you 5 seconds to pause the video. This mind map that I'm showing you as an example is very large, and I just want to emphasize to you right off, there's no right or wrong answer. This is about exercise, and it's about exercising your brain, not my brain, all right? But here's how I organized it in my head. And I'm going to start in the upper right and just go around in a clockwise manner. So, of course, the address classes A, B, and C, class A, B, and C, those need to be somewhere. Those ought to go together, I would think, somewhere. And we talked about 4 facts about a network and 4 facts about a subnet. So what were they for a subnet? The subnet ID, the subnet broadcast address, and then the first and last usable addresses that are one more and one less than those first 2 numbers. Then there were a lot of synonyms, a lot of terms that really referred to the same idea. So for subnet ID, we had subnet address and subnet number. And then simply subnet, just a little briefer. And sometimes people use the word prefix. And then this idea of resident subnet, which is really a term I popularized in my books, just referred to an address resides in or is a part of some subnet. Then there's some synonyms for the word network in the context of addressing. So you've got the network ID, the network number, and the network address that you can use as synonyms of each other. And if that's all we had, that'd still be a pretty big mind map for our kind of review exercises here, but I've got a whole left side here, so let's just keep going. So on the bottom left, the address structure, you remember that? Well, I didn't set it up this way in the content video, but the 3-part structure is the classful view of the address structure, and that's the one with the network, subnet, and host part of the view of the address. It's a way to think about the address. Whereas the classless view, which I talked about at the very end of that video, is a 2-part view of the address where you don't care about the dividing line between the network and subnet part. And we call those the prefix and host parts. Then just as a brief aside, we had this subnet broadcast address with a synonym for that. So I put that in there, the directed broadcast address. And honestly, sitting here, I don't remember if I actually used that in the video. So if you're like, hey, you didn't use that, well, maybe I didn't. So sorry about that. Then the subnet mask, we talked about that a lot, right? So we have this term, subnet mask, and I organize things as I always do in these mind map exercises where it's like, hey, these 3 things go together, but I got to put a label on it to get my head around it. So these are the labels rather than terms here, contrast, synonyms, and types. So what do I mean by types? Well, there's a dotted decimal mask, there's a prefix style mask, and a binary mask, right? So we've got those. In the prefix style mask, some people refer to those as CIDR masks because that's the RFC that first popularized the use of the prefix style mask. Then, of course, subnet mask, there are synonyms and other terms we use. So there's net mask and prefix length, and some people even say prefix when referring to the mask, although that's a little bit inaccurate. But just be aware in a conversation, people might say, well, what's the prefix? It actually means the mask. And then I used the word contrast here, but just There are two terms that are really to contrast things, where if you talk about default masks, which means you're not subnetting, the subnet mask means you are subnetting and you've created some subnet bits. You've borrowed some host bits to create subnets. And then finally, we actually talked about a few routing concepts along the way here, where we use IP addresses as the source and destination IP address in a packet and the IP routing table. So since I had those terms in the video, I added them here. Large mind map. Feel free to update yours, but again, you don't have to update yours to match this. It's about organizing the ideas for what makes sense to you and what's in your memory right now. Hope you enjoyed this mind map activity. If you're new to the channel, of course, please click subscribe. For anyone, click like. That tells YouTube you liked the video and it helps me out too. Hey, thanks for hanging out. Talk to you later.